Chocolate takes a complicated path to get from where it starts to where it ends up, not only in terms of its rich history and specific production technique, but also in regard to the humans whose work makes it all possible. In the year 2000, a documentary titled Slavery, A Global Investigation was released. In one segment of the documentary, footage from cocoa farms in West Africa is shown, where children are working, stating that they have been brought to the cocoa plantations from neighboring countries, and they're not paid for their work, and they are not allowed to leave. Many people didn't realize this was happening. When they found out, they were upset, and they didn't want to keep buying chocolate. In the United States, the government stepped in, and there were talks about implementing a labeling system. Chocolate manufacturers had to make it clear on their packaging whether child labor was involved or not in their supply chain. The chocolate companies fought back, saying that there was no way they could prove that there was no child labor used in their supply chain. They blamed this on the complex trading practices that have grown around the chocolate industry in West Africa. However, they promised they'd handle the situation, and signed an agreement that by 2005 there would be no more child labor used to produce cocoa as long as no labels were added to their products. This date was pushed forward several times, and many companies are now promoting their commitment to sustainable, fair cocoa farming by the year 2025. 2/3 of all the cocoa produced in the world comes from the west coast of Africa. Most of this is grown on family-owned farms, which are around 4 to 5 acres. At a cocoa plantation, a worker will harvest a pod, which will then be opened by someone who scoops the beans out by hand and leaves them in the heat to ferment. After a few days, the beans are taken to nearby villages or areas in the sun where they can dry. Then, a middleman arrives to buy the beans. They'll buy beans from several farmers, and now the beans are mixed. They'll be taken to a warehouse that buys beans from several middlemen, and now the beans are mixed even further. Already you would have a hard time tracing the cocoa back to its original farm. After that, the beans are sold to bigger warehouses, who trade with exporters, who sell to a small number of massive cocoa trading companies, who then sell to chocolate manufacturing companies, who sell to retailers, who sell to you. Every time the beans change hands, somebody's looking to get paid. The average cocoa tree will produce somewhere between 20 and 70 pods a year, which will result in an average of 1,800 beans. It takes around 400 beans to make 1 pound of chocolate. This means that you can get about 40 average-sized bars of chocolate per tree per year. Cocoa farmers in Côte d'Ivoire have an average of 5,000 trees, which will produce an average of 9 million beans a year, equaling around 22,500 pounds of chocolate. That's just under 250,000 Hershey's chocolate bars. A Hershey's bar costs you about $1 United States dollar. The chocolate industry makes over $100 billion a year. Farm incomes vary greatly, but the average cocoa farm household in West Africa houses 8 or so people and brings in less than $3,000 per year. Exploitation in the chocolate industry starts somewhere in the middle and moves further and further down the line until it rests on the shoulders of the most vulnerable. From the year 2000 to the year 2019, the estimated number of children working on cocoa farms increased by 20%. A film from 2010 titled The Dark Side of Chocolate shows footage of children who say they've been trafficked from neighboring countries into Côte d'Ivoire. People interviewed in the film say that many of the children will go with traffickers on the promise of work and money they can send back to their families. There are options for the consumer who can't give up chocolate but understands a child's future shouldn't be the cost of confection. There are certifications like Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance, and buying products with these labels is a start. A percentage of the farms are inspected to ensure no children are working there, and farmers are assisted in selling as many of their beans as possible at the fair trade price, which is often higher and more stable than market price. Unfortunately, it is not a perfect system. In recent years, people have started manufacturing chocolate directly in Côte d'Ivoire. While it's not always easy to purchase these products, making an extra effort to investigate is an acknowledgement of the reality of where modern chocolate comes from. There are also other regions of the world where cacao is grown. Many smaller scale chocolatiers are often able to share information about the individual farms and farmers they work with. which makes it easier for consumers to know what their options are. These stories and statistics represent actual other humans with memories who dream and make thousands of tiny choices each day. Their work sustains a massive global industry that they have no control over. The layers of complexity that go into something as simple as a bar of chocolate are easy to overlook when faced with a choice in a grocery store. The chocolate industry is not the only place you will find this story. Each video in this series has a link to a list of sources, many of which are videos including footage from farms and conversations with the people who work on them.